Good morning. I'm going to try something new today. I figure if I sit down, I can preach a little longer. No, that's not the case. So yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the attacks on America. Come to be known as 9/11. I had to recently educate a student. Nobody who goes here. It was somebody else that didn't go to this church, and they didn't understand the idea of why the attacks happened on September 11th, and so I helped them understand. He says, well, what numbers are associated with September 11th? And they were clueless. I says, well, September is what month? 9. Okay, what is 9/11? September 11th. I'm like, come on, use your brain here. What individual numbers do you see when you put 9/11 together? 911. Oh, 911. We also call it Patriots Day because we had some patriots who believed in what they were doing. We had some people who were willing to do whatever it takes to help other people in need. And I want to look at that today. But before we really get into that, there's a little bit lesser known thing that happened yesterday that the majority of the world cares nothing about. And probably some of you in this room or people watching on TV, you probably don't care about this either. But yesterday was the Wabash Trace Marathon, Half Marathon, and Relay. Yeah, I can see how enthused you guys are about that. My wife is not in here. She's helping set it up for something this afternoon. But she ran in it, and I was able to go and cheer her on. Woo, way to go. Some other people watched too. She finished, even though she was finished in pain. Congratulations to her. Eric ran the marathon. Way to go, Eric. I was told that finished in pain also. I think his muscles were starting to cramp on him. But I hear he were in second place in his age group. Good job. I was also talking, Kayla ran in the relay. Am I going in and out? They took first place. So congratulations to them. My wife told me that she wanted to run in the relay next year, and I told her I will run on one condition, that Kayla's team does not run because I don't want to lose to them. And that's the only way that I could win is if, one thing, you guys know that I've been training for this. Do we need to get me a new mic? Am I going in and out? Once I did? Okay. Well, I'll let you tell me when I need a new mic. So I've been training for at least 4 months, running anywhere from 3 to 10. I even actually got up to 16 miles this summer running, and I put a lot of effort into it. I got my mind and my body prepared to run this half marathon. And so yesterday morning, when I got up, I was excited to get out there because I had prepared myself physically and mentally to run this. I knew I was not going to win, okay? The guy who won the marathon, he averaged a 6-minute mile. And he did that for 26 miles. The last time I did 10 miles, I could barely average 10 and a half minutes a mile. And I only did 10 miles. He was cruising. But I felt I was prepared. I was going to run my fastest half marathon to date, although this would only have been my second. But it was still going to be my fastest. So we get out to Imogene, and we were running late. So we got there almost right about the time it was going to start. They shoot the little gun off, and we all run, and we run down. And Imogene is a small little town. You know this. You live here. So there's a gravel road heading north, and we have to run up that road, then get onto the trace, and then run further north, and then turn around and run south all the way back to Shenandoah. We get about we get at 0.68 miles outside of Imogene, and I twist my ankle. Hence why I'm sitting down and not standing. Have you ever prepared for something and it was even excited about it, and then come to find out, oh, just kidding, you're not going to be able to do it? It's frustrating. It's frustrating. I was really ready for this. What's even more frustrating is about 3 weeks ago, I started having this thought in my head was, maybe I shouldn't run, because if I run this marathon, and if I get hurt running this marathon, and I was thinking specifically of my knee, because I have knee problems, and the more I run, but I've been running these 10 miles, and my knee, I wear a knee brace, hasn't been bothering me, so I'm not going to get hurt. My knee's going to be fine. I can run this 13 miles. It won't be a big deal. But that thought kept coming. If I run it, and if I get hurt, it's going to hurt my golf game. Seriously. Listen, there's a lot of twisting going on, and you don't want to do that with your knee. I never once thought that I would twist my ankle. The thought did not occur to me. I was worried about twisting my knee and hurting my knee, not my ankle. If I had known that there was a chance of me twisting my knee, I would have twisting my ankle. I would have worn my ankle. I'm wearing it now. I've had that, believe it or not, I've had that since I was in high school, and it works. I bought a new one. You know they don't make things the way they used to? They used to be really good quality back in the day. Not anymore. The new brace I have for my ankle rubs all over it's just terrible. So I use the one that's almost 40 years old. If I had known what was going to happen, I could better been prepared for the future. And that's the thing I want to look at today. Are we prepared? Are we prepared? And I'm not just talking about prepared for emergency in life. There are going to be emergencies in life, and we need to be prepared for them. Your car breaks down. Are you prepared to get it fixed? This past week, I knew that the tires on Jeanette's car were probably getting a lot of wear on them, and I knew they needed to be replaced, but I was thinking, well, they'll last another month, and then I'll get them replaced. Well, this past week, Jeanette was turning around a corner, and she hit a curb a little too fast, and there was a piece of metal stuck and poked a hole about that side in the side of her tire. And so I spent the next half an hour taking that tire off, putting the donut on. Thank you, Ron, for being there talking to me so I didn't curse while I was angry. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't have done that. But are you prepared for when things don't go as planned? Or not even as planned, when just surprises happen? Are you prepared for the future? We need to be prepared for the future. And what I want to talk about today is the words that Jesus gives to his disciples, that he also gives to us to prepare us for the future. And I'm not just talking about what's going to be happening here on earth. Well, that is part of it. I'm talking about the eternity that we are going to have. Matthew chapter 24 and 25 is what scholars call the Olivet Discourse. In the book of Matthew, there are 5 different times that Jesus has what they call a monologue, which is he talks to other people. There's no really, interchange. And usually what happens is he's teaching his disciples. He's talking to people and teaching them. And usually he's sitting down. In this time, in Jesus' time, when a teacher, a rabbi was teaching, he would sit down. If you go to school nowadays, everybody else sits down and the teacher stands up. But it was very common, and that's the most, the way everybody did it, is that they would sit down and teach. What Jesus was doing here is just that. So let's look at the setting first of Matthew chapter 24 and 25. We read that in the first 4 verses. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, "Do you see all of these buildings? I tell you the truth, they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." We'll stop there for a minute. Here's what we need to understand. This is the last week of Jesus' life. Okay? He had been traveling from Bethany to Jerusalem, which is not a long walk, and spending time in Jerusalem, and then going back to Bethany to stay the night in Bethany. He is on his way back from Jerusalem. And if you've ever been in that area, there are a lot of little hills that you got to walk up and down over. And so they're on their way back. Jesus had just been spending most of the day in the temple and interchanging with Pharisees and other people. And he's on his way back with his disciples. And this is where the disciples are. They're on a hill and they're looking the temple, and they say, "Look at this. Look at all of these buildings. They're magnificent." And Jesus takes the opportunity to educate them. He says, "Do you see all these buildings that you're impressed with? One day, they're all going to be completely torn down. Not one of them, not one stone actually will be left on top of another." We know that this was fulfilled in 70 AD, when when the temple was completely destroyed. In fact, they say that not one stone was left on top of another. Now, typically, when you destroy a stone building, you usually leave a pile of rubble, right? It's just a pile of rubble. Unless there is something valuable within that pile of rubble. You know what these stones were covered with? Gold. So they would have taken each of these stones and they would have looked for the gold, and they would have uncovered every stone to try and find as much gold as possible. Whatever value that was in there, they would find. And so the idea of one stone not be left on top of another would be pretty accurate. But that wasn't the important thing. He wanted it to lead them to another thing. So he mentions that, and then it says in verse 3, later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you." And that's where we're going to stop for a minute. Jesus begins his teaching time with telling them not to be misled. Over the next 2 chapters, we're going to look at these 2 chapters as a whole, because sometimes I fear we miss the meaning because our periscope is so zoomed in. We are looking at it through a microscope instead of backing up and seeing it as a whole. all of chapter 24 and 25 has to deal with Jesus answering the questions that the disciples just asked. When these things will happen, a sign of his return and the end of the world. And Jesus does an amazing thing to help the disciples understand what's truly important. He's preparing them through his teaching on what's truly important and what they need to be doing. So, like I said, it's 2 chapters. I don't want to read, but I want to highlight some of the verses that he talks. So in verses 5 through 36, Jesus talks specifically about false messiahs and false prophets, wars and rumors, famines and earthquakes. And he says all of these things are going to be are the first of the birth pains. Now, I don't know if any of you have been around a woman who's been pregnant, about to give birth. It can be an exciting and grueling experience. Exciting when the birth pains first start, because they're not very severe. There's a little bit of excitement there. But as the birth pains get closer and closer to when the baby is born, guess what happens? They get more severe. When I was holding Jeanette's hand, when Eli was about to be born, when her birth pains, when she was starting to have contractions, they weren't very severe. She didn't grab very tightly onto my hand. But before she took the epidural, she says, "I'm not stupid. I'm gonna make it easy on myself." But before they did that, and they got more and more severe, I could tell that she was going through more and more pain, because every time they got more severe, she squeezed tighter on my hand. She didn't know it, but I did. I could feel it. And it was a sign that they were getting stronger. And what happens is when they get stronger, they happen more frequently. These are typical things about birth pains that everybody knows. So when we look at this, it would not be a far stretch to believe that Jesus isn't saying that just because there's false prophets and false messiahs and rumors of war. You know how long rumors of war have been around? People have been around. You know how long famine has been around? Since people have been around. What about since the earth has been around? So what is Jesus saying when he says these things will happen and then the end will come? What is he talking about? Well, the idea is to understand birth pains. Birth pains happen more frequently the closer the end gets, and they happen more severely. The wars and rumors of war. You know what they used to call World War I? Anybody? The war to end all wars. Why? Because it was literally the first world war as we understand it. Everybody was either actively involved or passively involved. And that's recent. Now we've had, another one since then. But the idea of wars getting more and more severe, famine is getting more and more severe. Earthquakes happening more often and becoming more severe. What Jesus is saying here, he's not saying that these signs, that these things happening are a sign. What he's saying is these things happening when they become more severe and more frequently, it is going to be a sign, not the only sign. Don't mistake that, but it's going to be a sign that the end is near. And then we read through verses 37 to 51 of chapter 24, Jesus talks about how we respond to the coming of the end. So he talks about signs, and then he talks to his disciples about how you respond. In verses 37 and 34, he talks about Noah, and if the people in Noah's day had known the flood was coming, they would have repented and gotten on the boat. Then he talks in verses 40 and 41 about 2 men and 2 women. The men were working out in the field. One was taken and one was left. The women were grinding. One was taken and one was left. Then he talks about the homeowner. If he had known what time the thief was going to come in and break into his house and steal, he would have been aware. And then he talks about the faithful servant in charge that the master left in charge. And he says, if he had known the time the master was going to return, he would have mistreated his servants. All 4 of those, Jesus is pointing to a very specific thing. Being ready, being prepared when the master returns. So Jesus gives us first the idea that there are going to be signs, and we have to be aware of those signs, know what those signs are. Second, be prepared. And this is the idea that Jesus gives. The response we should have to all of these signs is that we should be prepared for eternity. That's the point Jesus is getting across. Then, that's in chapter 24. Then in chapter 25, he tells 2 parables, and then he talks about the future. And all three of these things are specifically meant to bring across 3 ideas about the future, about being prepared for the future. So, what are those three stories? Now, I'm sure that you probably have all heard each one of these, and I've preached on these here, in fact, in the past. But what I've never done is I've never taken a backed up view of these 3, and that's what I want to do. What 3 things is Jesus trying to teach us about being prepared for the end, for eternity, through these 2 parables and this end time story? Well, the first one we read is about the bridesmaids. And you probably have all heard the story. There are 10 bridesmaids, and they all have oil lamps, and they all have oil in their lamps, and they're all waiting for the bridegroom to come. The bridegroom is delayed in coming to the point where their lamps are starting to go out. 5 of them were wise and brought extra oil. 5 of them were foolish and didn't bring extra oil. And so the ones who didn't have the extra asked for extra from the ones who had extra and says, if we give you some of ours, we won't have enough. And so you need to go buy your own. They left by their own. While they were gone, the bridegroom came back. The ones that were prepared went in with the bridegroom. The ones that weren't prepared were left outside. That's kind of the gist of the story. There are a couple of things to take notice. One is all of the bridegrooms had lamps and oil to start with. They all felt like they were prepared. When I got up yesterday morning, I felt like I was prepared to run. But I didn't, because something happened to show me that I was not completely prepared. I know that I have a weak ankle, and it is subject to twist fairly easily. I sprain my ankle probably once every 2 years, usually pretty severe. I know that. So why did I not wear an ankle brace to prevent that from happening? Well, maybe it was because I'm stupid. Maybe I just didn't think it was going to happen. These bridesmaids, they didn't think. If all of them had really believed that the groom would be delayed, they all would have brought extra oil, but they didn't. And he tells at the end of the story in chapter 25, verse 13, he says, "So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or hour of my return." That's how he sums up this story. Keep watch, because you don't know when God's coming. You don't know when Jesus is coming back. Keep watch. Now, that idea of keeping watch isn't just kind of sitting on your chair and looking out over the. It's watching with active anticipation. These bridesmaids, they were eager for the groom to get there. It wasn't like, oh, we got to do this job, and he's taking too long. No, they were eager. They were excited about what was about to transpire. Hey, marriage was a celebration. They had responsibility that they had to do. They were eagerly anticipating. Now they all fell asleep. They all had to be awakened. But Jesus is getting to the heart of the issue here, is that not all of them were really keeping watch. Not all of them were eagerly anticipating the arrival of the bridegroom. Are we eagerly anticipating the arrival of Jesus? Sure, I hear people say, oh, it will be nice when Jesus comes back. I can't wait till Jesus comes back and he takes me off of this earth. And that's I am excited about that too. I'm excited about going to a place where there is no more pain and suffering. But am I eagerly anticipating that, or is it just a subtle desire in my life? There's a difference. This parable teaches us that being prepared for eternity requires us to actively anticipate Jesus' coming. Actively anticipate. Not just passively sit around going, oh, it would be nice if Jesus would come back today. Or maybe it would be nice if Jesus would come back. What are you doing to actively anticipate his coming? That's what the first parable was about. The second parable, remember, Jesus is teaching his disciples what to do, how to prepare for his return. He already talked about in chapter 24, and now he's saying, be prepared, anticipate. And then he goes to the next parable. The second parable, he teaches us to be prepared, talking about three servants. And again, this is a very familiar parable. There's a lot that we could draw out of this parable. Parables usually have one main behind them. And Jesus, he tells us what this is at the end of the parable. So let's go over these three servants. Here's what the overview. Master's going on along, three servants. To one servant, he gives 5 talents. To another servant, he gives 2 talents. And to the last servant, he gives 1 talent. And the Bible says that he gives them those talents according to what they can handle. So God's not going to give 5 talents to somebody who can't handle 5 talents. Okay? And a lot of people use the word talent as abilities. And while I do believe that we are responsible for the abilities we are given, talent is not the right understanding the way we think of talent. We think of talent as our ability, God-given ability to be able to do something. When I was growing up, I had this natural ability to pick up a sport fairly quickly. It didn't. I could, whether it was ping pong, it was basketball, golf. I could pick up. I was not going to be a master of it by any means, but I could pick up a sport fairly quickly. pretty decent at it. I learned, and Eli is still quite young, but I don't think he's going to get that trait from me. He's still young. It's hard to say, and I've come to the conclusion that if he is not athletic from the way I am, hey, he's going to have other things he's going to be good at. The only thing is he's going to be good at golf. I don't care what I have to do to make him good at golf. I will spend $1,000, $10,000 on lessons, but he's going to be good at golf. The other things, not so much. Jesus is not talking about that kind of talent. The Greek word for talent here is a weighting. It's a weight system. It was a measurement, and the measurement is. Many people believe that it was a measurement about 100, somewhere between 75 and 100 pounds. So one talent was between 75 and 100 pounds, and a lot of them either believe it was either gold or silver. Silver is the weight that they were using. Let's go with silver. One talent of silver, 75 pounds, give or take, was equivalent to 20 years labor wages. So the first servant was giving 5 talents, and how much is that? How many years of service is that? 5 times 20 is 100 years of wage. That's what the first servant was given. The second given was 2 talents, 75 to 100 pounds of silver, which was 40 years of wages, and the last one was given 1 talent, which is 20 years of wages. So we're not talking about giving somebody $1,000 and say, hey, I want you to go and increase this money for me. They were given a large sum of money. The issue was not how much they were given. The issue was what they did with what they were given. The first 2 doubled their money. The last one didn't do anything. Well, he did do something with his money. He went and he buried it in the ground and waited for his master to return. His master returned, and he said, here you go. I'm giving you back exactly what you gave me. Here's what the third servant said in verse 25 of chapter 25 of Matthew. He says this, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. How many know fear rarely gives you the outcome you desire? Even more than that, it rarely gives you the outcome that God desires. He was motivated by fear. And what Jesus was trying to get his disciples to understand is, remember, this is under the understanding that Jesus is trying to prepare his disciples for eternity. What he's trying to get his disciples to understand is that this parable teaches us that being prepared for eternity requires us to be productive with what we have. We have to be productive with what we have if we want to be prepared for eternity. Now, again, does that include our talents? Yes. But the gist of this story is not about your abilities. It's about what you have been, what physical things have you been given. If Jesus wanted to talk about physical ability, he could have used other language instead of using the word that describes an amount of money. And the question is, what are we doing with what we have been given? Not just physical attributes, but what are we doing with what we have been given? Now, if you, just because you don't do everything perfect, you don't use everything that God has given to you for godly purposes, doesn't mean you're going to go to hell and spend eternity in hell. Okay, because we know that it is not our actions that get us into heaven, it is our faith in Christ. That is what gets us to heaven. But to be best prepared for eternity, we need to make sure that we use what God has given to us for the Master's purpose. Everything that we have is a gift from God. I talked about this a couple, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that you could have been very easily born in a third world country where you were scrapping the garbage piles for food. The fact that you were born in America is a gift from God. And so everything we have being a gift from God, we have to understand that if we, and I'm talking financially, I'm talking about the possessions we have, I'm talking about the money we make. If we are unproductive in the eyes of God, we are not preparing ourselves for the eternity that we could have. So we know that we need to be actively anticipating Jesus' coming, which means there's an activity on our part that we need to be doing. We know that we need to be prepared for eternity by being productive with the things that He's given to us. The final thing that Jesus talks about has to do not with a parable, but a story He tells about the end times. And I've preached on this too. It's a story of the sheep and the goats. And Jesus comes back, and He comes with all of His angels with Him, which means it's not a secret. When He comes back at this point in time, everybody's going to know about it. So we know that this is not the rapture. This is Him coming back in victory, which means it's the beginning of the millennial reign of Christ. That being the case, let me go ahead and read this real quick. Oh, not chapter 5. We're in chapter 25. Verse 31 says this. I don't have it on the screen, so just listen. When the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the angels with Him, He will sit on His throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on His right and the goats on His left. This is not the rapture. He is coming in glory. This is His second coming to the earth, in which He's going to establish a millennial reign. Putting that in perspective, when He is separating the sheep and the goats, the implication is those sheep and the goats are the people who are here on earth. So those are the sheep and the goats those are the people who did not get raptured with Jesus. Now, does that mean, now it says that He gathers all the nations, and there's a lot of discussion about whether that, when He gathers all the nations, is it just the people who are on earth when He comes back? Is it the people who are on earth and the Christians who had been raptured previously? Are they coming back and going to be separated too? You know what? And honestly, in all of eternity, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we understand what Jesus is trying to say to His disciples. Because whether you live through the tribulation and you don't experience the rapture, or you come back with Jesus for the millennial reign, and then you have to face the deciding factor of whether you're going to be a sheep or a goat, the idea is all the same. we are going to be judged and rewarded or punished based on what we have done. And we see that with what we've done with our possessions in the previous parable. We see that in being ready in the parable of the bridesmaid. And now we see Jesus doing something very specific about our actions. So Jesus comes, separates the sheep and the goats, puts one over here, says, "Great are you guys because you did all these wonderful things." And they say, "What? We don't remember doing that." And Jesus says, "Whatever you've done to my brothers, you've done for me." And he says over here, "Cursed are you, for you didn't do any of these things." And they say, "What?" And he says, "What you've done for my brothers, you've also done for me. Or what you didn't do for my brothers, you didn't do for me." Here's the thing about the sheep and the goats. Both sheep and goats think they are doing the right thing, but only one was really doing the right thing. There's a reward for doing the right thing and a punishment for not doing the right thing. How great your reward is for doing the right thing. Remember, doing the right thing does not save you. We've already established that. Your faith saves you. Okay? And taking care of that faith, that saves you. Your reward is going to be based on your preparedness for eternity. Matthew 5, verses 46, 47. Jesus is speaking in Sermon on the Mount, and he says this: "If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. But if you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else?" What Jesus is saying is love and kindness needs to go across the board to everybody. Because if you just do it to those who love you and are kind to you, it does not benefit you at all. In this story of the sheep and the goats, there were several things that Jesus talked about that they did. Feeding the hungry, giving water to those who are thirsty, clothing them, visiting people in jail. These are actions that people are doing based on the compassion they have for other people. This doesn't deal with what you have, like profiting with what God has given to you, the physical things God given to you, like the previous parable was of the talents. This is dealing specifically with what you do for other people and the compassion you have for them. This prophecy, because Jesus is talking about a time in the future and what's going to take place in the future. And he says, in it, he teaches us that being prepared for eternity requires us to be compassionate in how we act. Cannot get away from that. Whether you choose to do something or not, whether you believe it or not, every decision you make, every action you take or every action you don't take, everything that you own and how you choose to use it, all of it is preparing you for eternity. If you have accepted Jesus and you are living and you are doing your best to live a holy life before God, making him your Lord, you're going to go to heaven. If you don't, you're not going to go to heaven. The issue that Jesus is dealing with here is, what is your experience after you die going to be like? Are you preparing yourself right now for eternity? And if you think you are, there's a way of judging that. And Jesus just gave it to you. Are you actively anticipating his return? Are you being productive with the things he's given you? And are you being compassionate to those who need your help? Now, this is not the end all of preparing for eternity. I understand that. But I can guarantee you this. This is the last teaching session that Jesus has with his disciples. This is the last time that we read about in the Bible, anywhere in the Bible. This is the last time before his death that Jesus sits down with his disciples and he talks to them about what they need to know before he dies. And so, you know that if you know your end is coming and you want to tell your children something important, you're going to tell them what's most important. And this is what Jesus is doing. He's preparing his disciples for what life is going to be like after he's gone and preparing them for eternity. And how he does that is by saying, you need to be actively seeking my return. You need to be productive with what I have given you. And you need to be compassionate in the way you act. Not just helping those who can help you. We like to help people if we think that we can somehow benefit from helping them. That's what we do with our friends. We do that with our friends all the time. Hey, I will help you. Why am I helping you? Because we're friends. And you might think, well, I really don't get anything out of that. Yeah, you do. They're friendship. When was the last time you helped somebody who had absolutely no way of helping you back in any way? And that's typically going to be a complete stranger. When I was, Jeanette and I were living in Conyers, and I was a youth pastor, and we were going to go kayaking right after church. So we had a Jeep Cherokee at the time, and I had our kayaks on top of the Jeep Cherokee, and we had everything loaded up. Right after service was over, we ran home, got dressed, hopped in the Jeep, and we were headed out to go kayaking. And we stopped at Taco Bell. For those of you who don't know what Taco Bell is, it's also called Taco Smell or something like that. There is another word that I'm not going to call it either, but we stopped to eat. We got back out in the car, and I turned the key, and it would not start. The starter had gone out. Now, I'm dressed in shorts, sleeveless shirt, and I have a bandana on. Not your typical youth pastor attire who's just come out of church, right? And a guy comes out, and I could tell he had been to church. He was dressed in your good Southern church clothes, and his car had a little cross on the back, and I know that could be a little deceptive, but he comes up to me when he sees I have the hood up. He comes up to me, and he says, I see you're having car trouble. I says, yeah, I think the starter's gone on. I think I need to get a new starter. He knows nothing about me. He says, well, can I help you out? Hey, how about we go over here to the auto store, and I'll buy you a new starter. He knows nothing about me. We weren't destitute financially. I could easily go buy and I told him, I says, you know what, I appreciate that, but I can buy my own starter. He was willing to be compassionate and help somebody he didn't know, knowing chances are I would never see him again. We lived in a fairly large town. The chances of me seeing him again was slim to none. It would have been easy for him to see, oh, they have a car trouble. Oh, Jesus, I just pray that you will supply their need. Okay, I did my duty. Now let's go back to what we were doing. He showed true compassion in what he did, not only in caring for us, but also in managing God's money well, because he was not just willing to help me, he was willing to pay for the starter for the Jeep. That right there, he was preparing for his eternity. And the question that I have, are we preparing for our eternity? Are we actively anticipating Jesus' return by being productive for what Jesus has given to us and compassionate to how we act to other people? I tell you, I say this quite frequently, but it's because God about the words that I preach. I've failed miserably sometimes with some of these things. I've often spent the things that God has given to me solely on myself for nobody else, just because I wanted to do it. I've often acted compassionately only to people that I knew, maybe not consciously, but in the back of my mind, I knew could help me. Help a friend out. Are you actively preparing for eternity? And how are you doing it? That's the gist of what Jesus is telling his disciples in chapter 25 of Matthew. And it's important because it's the last thing he teaches them that we read about. So now you have to ask yourself, and I'm going to close in prayer, and as I close in prayer, I want you to have a serious conversation with God. Maybe you need to just pray, God, I know I haven't been productive what you've given to me. I know I haven't acted compassionately. I know I haven't been actively anticipating your return. I know that. Help me. Or maybe you just need some direction. God, I want to be this way. Show me what I can do. Show me how I can act. And let him guide your thoughts. And let this be, don't just pray it right now and then go out these doors and forget all about it. Make this your prayer this week. Every morning when you wake up, make this your prayer. God, help me to anticipate your coming. Help me to be productive what you've given to me. And help me be compassionate to those who cannot return the favor. Or cannot return the action. Let that be your prayer every morning this week. And then when God shows you something, act on it. That's how we prepare for eternity. Heavenly Father, we love you. We thank you so much for the blessings you've placed in our lives, the amazing things that we took to experience because of your blessing. How you've led us, how you've been there with us. Lord, help us. As you've taught us in the book of Matthew, your return is coming. Help us to be actively anticipating your return. Help us to live productive lives with what you've given to us. Multiplying what we have for your kingdom. Help us to be compassionate, not just to those who can repay us, but to those who can't, to strangers, even to our enemies. Help us love them and do what it takes to help them. Lord, let this be not just a prayer or something we do, but let it be a lifestyle so that we can live a life preparing for eternity. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your love. And we ask that you would root it into our hearts as we go and leave this place. We ask all of this in your name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I love you guys. Be blessed, and we'll see you next week.